Right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Congratulations. I absolutely love this. And I have to tell you,
Yay.
this is the first Harry Potter film that I actually cried.
Hey, that's cool. I'm glad we got you then. That's excellent.
You really did. And,
Oh, good.
let's talk about that, get right
Yeah.
into that, because this is such an emotional roller coaster, this one. And I was wondering for you, the challenges, coming in as the fifth director, fourth, realistically, it must have been for you, was it a little bit scary at first, coming onto this set with a crew and a cast that all knew each other? Was it, a little nervous for you?
Do you know, the nerves lasted for about 2 minutes. And the very first nerves, David Heyman, who produces, kind of walked me onto a set of Mike's film, Mike, who did Goblet of Fire. So he brought me, and it was like walking into a kind of Roman auditorium. And it was a second unit shot, and second units, you kind of think, well, that's 4 blokes and a camera, isn't it? This second unit was like 150 people, and like 30 foot up in the air was Dan on a broomstick. And there were these big wind machines, and there was Jamie, the second unit director, screaming through a megaphone, and it was like, I thought, bloody hell, this is huge. And I had a flutter in my tummy at that point that lasted 5 minutes. And then, you know what, after that, it felt like coming home. It was really strange. I just kind of took to it like a duck to water. And I think it's because it felt like a very safe environment. I'd never made a studio picture before. I always assumed when you made studio pictures, there was some team of execs who would always be fluttering around, looking over your shoulder. But they kind of just let me get on with it. They were very excited about the dailies. They've been very positive and happy with the film. So I felt more or less like, well, this is pretty cool. I can just make the film I want to make, and I did.
And you sure did.
Yeah.
How did you acclimate with the kids? Let's talk about the kids, because they're so phenomenal in this film. And I was saying earlier, it's just amazing how we've watched them grow up before our eyes.
Yeah.
And to see what they've turned into, unbelievable. You must have been just, gift from God, these kids.
Yeah, they're great. One of the reasons, I think Chris Columbus and David Heyman, who found them, originally, it's a remarkable feat to choose not just 3 kids who would immediately kind of capture the empathy and the imagination of such a vast audience, but 3 human beings who, throughout this extraordinary kind of global circus, retain the sense of themselves. And, they could have turned into 3 monsters because they're superstars. And the truth is, they're not. So they were really canny when they first found them. And I've arrived at a really exciting time for me and for them, because now they want to really spread their wings. They really want to spread their wings as actors. They want to be tested. They want to really grow their skills and their abilities and their talents and their craft. And, I'm an actor's director. I love performances. I love actors. And so we kind of entered this collaboration whereby we were determined to really push what they could do and what they could achieve. And they were so up for that, And it's quite an emotional, intense story, this. And it required quite a lot of gear changes, especially for Dan. And he approached it with such ambition and such determination to really go for it. Yeah. And there were days when he'd literally run to the floor of the set. He'd race on. And unfortunately, his kind of adrenaline is infectious. I'd find myself after about 10 minutes. I remember doing a scene with the Dementor attack. We were working in this tunnel because I wanted to put it in this subway because I figured it would be really intense and claustrophobic. It would make the attack much scarier. He gets adrenalized and excited when he's working, and I get excited and adrenalized. And by the time we'd finished shooting for the day, we were both buzzing completely. And they were all actually really responsive to being pushed, basically.
Well, yeah, you pushed Dan to the limit, there's no question about it. And what is so exciting to watch is that these kids are now relating on a level that they can relate to in real life. What you did with Dan in this movie, I just don't know how he got through certain days of the shoot. You really pushed him. What, totally impressed you about him when you started to work with him?
He's like he's got an amazing curiosity, Dan. He's as an actor, he's a sponge, as all great actors are. He's got all the attributes of a great actor, in the sense that he's observing all the time. He's soaking things in all the time. And I got a bereavement counsellor to come and talk to us about what people deal with if they witness something traumatic and terrible. Because in the previous film, he saw Cedric Diggory get killed. So immediately I said right at the front, Dan, why don't we talk to someone who knows what the reality of that might be for someone? And we got this lovely lady to come in, and Dan and I were both sat there listening to this woman talk about trauma and emotional responses to trauma. And again, Dan picked up so much from that he would then recycle and reuse later in the journey he took in the film. And he's got a real work ethic, so he never stops thinking, never stops exploring, always, and that's really satisfying. And he's always finding a way into a scene. He's at the beginning when Harry's on the swings, and Harry feels ostracised and kind of outside of the community, and he's been denied any information about what's going on at Hogwarts. You know, he says, you know what, I feel like one of those Vietnam vets who come back after, you know, no one understands what they've been through, no one talks to them, everyone treats them like a pariah. And he kind of made that analogy himself. It's a very powerful, based on reading and the movies he'd seen, and yet he brought a big part of himself to it as well. And so I encourage them to kind of try and use their own, you know, experience of the world and their experience of the characters and fuse those two things together to make as much as possible of the scenes that we were shooting.
How does the Order of the Phoenix relate to today's society? There's so much going on in this movie, but on the surface, really? Wow.
Yeah, do you know, there are some political parallels. They're kind of small, and they're not necessarily, not completely contemporary. But you know, there's a notion of this horrible dark force out there. You don't know when they're going to strike, and a government agency which is kind of gathering forces, and an obsession with security, an obsession with kind of closing down certain freedoms, and you know, we might find parallels in that in our own world, in a non-wizard world, which are quite useful possibly. And also one of the things I found fascinating in the book was this notion that, you know, the ministry sends in its own bureaucrat, Dolores Umbridge, who's a bureaucrat, a fundamentalist, and she's determined to she has a doctrine which is all about taking anything that's imaginative or dangerous or playful out of the curriculum and making sure that the kids do something that feels really restricted and straight and square. She's a kind of real straight line teacher, and she hates all the liberals and the kind of crazy teachers at Hogwarts. And so there's a real kind of educational parable in there about, you know, should you really unlock kids' imaginations and give them freedom to explore and to challenge and question, or should you really shut them down and say, this is what it is, shut up and take it, you know? And so there are all sorts of interesting little political ideas in the book that we bring into the film. Fundamentally, it's a big entertainment, and we want people to enjoy it and have fun with it. But there are certain ideas in there that are very provocative, you know, especially for a younger audience.
Absolutely.
They can watch this movie, and you know, it's a movie to enjoy it ultimately. But there are some ideas in there which, you know, they won't be, you know, they'll hopefully find challenging and interesting as well.
Have to wrap, but I am very glad to hear that you're signed on for the next
Yes.
one. How excited are you to get started on that?
I can't wait to start shooting. I'm reading, you know, we're working on the script at the moment, and there are days when I just go, I can't wait to do that scene. I can't wait to see Dan do that, or Emma stretch for that, or, you know, there are some really cracking, and the next movie's more, this was intense. It deals with a very difficult 14 to 17-year-old period when you're going through your rebellion. The next one's sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's fun.
Right on.
Cool.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh,
this is fantastic.
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm so glad you enjoyed it.